Hi folks, today I want to talk about D&D. Recently there's been a lot of D&D going on in my life, so I've kind of been delving into the history of it, and I've been curious why all of a sudden it's having this renaissance. At least for me, it's having a renaissance because I've started doing it so much. I think there are two major reasons why D&D hasn't really been accessible to most people up until now. So I was out with a few people on Friday night, and I mentioned that I started playing D&D, and they said, "Oh really, what system are you using?" And I said, 5, and they said, "Ugh!" Their reaction was visceral disgust. And then they started talking about how Dungeons and Dragons is supposed to be hard, it's supposed to be complicated, you're supposed to get lost in these vast seas of numbers and modifiers and your weapons and your armor. I've come across this gatekeeping before. I think I understand it, but I never bought into it. Why do you not want people to love the things that you love? Why do you not want people to just like the things that you love? It's better than them not knowing it at all. I may or may not be able to recite Data's poem to his cat spot, but that doesn't mean I'm gonna begrudge somebody watching Star Trek for an hour and then getting on with their lives and not really giving it a second thought. So I think this comes from the idea that if outsiders come into your hobby, your closely guarded hobby, they're going to dilute it somehow. They're going to make it less meaningful. If it becomes part of popular culture, it's not going to be yours anymore. It's going to be everyone's. So it's also kind of a geeky hipsterism. As soon as your hobby makes it mainstream, you're not a geek anymore. You can't use it as part of your pantheon to belong to the geek world. So one of the results of this gatekeeping, I think, is this shroud of mystery around D&D. Nobody really knows how it works. You know that people do it, but it's probably teenage boys in somebody's basement and they're battling goblins for 16 hours. I don't really know. I don't do that. It's weird. So I think we've seen people starting to reject that kind of gatekeeping, and one way that they're doing it is, for example, Geek and Sundry, a YouTube channel, which is awesome. You should definitely go check it out. Has 2 RPG shows. The first one is Titan's Grave, and the second one, which is kind of new, it started earlier this year, is called Critical Role. And once I started watching Titan's Grave, I got a better idea of how D&D works. Once you see adult humans playing a game like this and just having shit tons of fun, there's no way that you don't want to do it. I don't understand why you would want to do it. It got even worse when Critical Role went live on Geek and Sundry's Twitch, because it's a bunch of voice actors playing D&D. The DM is Matthew Mercer. He's a voice actor. There are 8 other characters, player characters, they're all voice actors. To just see the world that Matthew Mercer weaves and all the characters that inhabit it, and they're all just so unique and different, and it's rich and it's colorful, and it's people using their imaginations. So I think we're going to see less and less of that gatekeeping, and I think that's a good thing. The second reason is D&D itself. It's come a long way since it was first invented, and by a long way I mean it doesn't actively exclude giant swaths of the population that aren't white males. In the first edition of D&D, there was a harlot table. If you needed to throw in some harlots in your game, you could roll to see what kind of harlot you would get. I'm gonna read some of these because holy shit. Slovenly Troll, Brazen Strumpet, Cheap Trollop, Saucy Tart, Wanton Wench, Expensive Doxy, Haughty Courtesan, Wealthy Procuress, Sly Pimp, and Rich Panderer. We need to have at least 12 types of harlot in our game, just for realism. So you can imagine that at that point, this hobby was not very welcoming to women. Also, in first edition of D&D, if you were playing a female character, your strength stats were capped lower than male characters. When Wizards of the Coast created the newest edition of D&D, the 5th edition, they had 2 years of playtesting, 2 years of public playtesting to get feedback on how the new edition would work. And there has been a serious effort on the part of Wizards of the Coast to make D&D more accessible to people, and it's not hard. Jeremy Crawford, the lead designer of the 5th edition of Dungeons and Dragons, actually had something to say about this. There's often been a perception that such games are for straight white men. One of our goals for the new edition of D&D has been to make it as welcoming as possible to its large, diverse audience. People of different races, ages, gender identities, and sexual orientations. D&D is for anyone who wants to gather with their friends to weave tales of heroic adventure. 26% of the people who contributed to the 5th edition's design are women. That's a higher percentage than any edition in the past. Pretending is for adults and kids. Pretending is for everyone. Right now I get to be Danielle Fowler, and I also get to be a dwarven paladin and a human sorceress who drank dragon's blood when she was 17. I'm pumped to get into this hobby, and I am pumped to see this change. I'm gonna learn how to be a dungeon master and pull all of my non-geek friends into D&D, and I will convert them. So if you want to know where I'll be every Thursday night, it's in my living room drinking tequila and watching Critical Role, hanging out with all my hashtag critters. And if you want to know where I'll be on Sunday, well, I guess that's up to the Dungeon Master.